All right, diving in again today. And today's topic, well, it's a bit of a heavy hitter, honestly. We're looking at the Tibetan Book of the Dead. You guys know I love to get into this kind of stuff. And this one's been on my list for a while, so I'm excited.
Yeah, it's definitely one of those texts that has a reputation. And maybe a little intimidating for some people, I think.
Oh, absolutely, yeah. Just the name itself, right? Book of the Dead, you immediately think like spooky, scary skeletons.
Yeah. Well, and there is that element to it, for sure, death and dying. But the Tibetan title actually gives you a bit more of a clue, I think. It's called The Great Liberation Through Hearing in the Bardo.
Okay, so not just a straightforward death and dying instruction manual.
Not quite. See, the Bardo, it's not just about what happens after death. It's about states of being we go through all the time. Transitions, gaps, the space between two things.
Okay, I'm intrigued already, and we can't forget about the author, right? Guru Rinpoche. He's kind of a big deal.
Yeah, he's like a founding father of Tibetan Buddhism. You might also hear him called Padmasambhava. And the book is essentially his teaching on navigating the Bardo. So imagine like a combination of psychology, philosophy, and honestly a bit of mystical adventure all rolled into one.
I'm so ready for this mystical adventure. But before we go too far down that road, let's break down some basics for folks who might be new to this. What exactly is Bardo then, if it's not just about the afterlife?
You're right. So think of Bardo as any kind of gap or in-between state. The most obvious one is, of course, death the Bardo between lives. But it's so much broader than that.
So like when you're in between jobs or something?
Exactly. Relationship ending, new relationship beginning, that's a Bardo. Or even smaller moments. You know that feeling when you're about to make a big decision and you can feel everything shifting? That's a mini Bardo right there.
Wow, okay. I'm already starting to see Bardo everywhere I look.
It's everywhere once you start to notice it. Now, the book goes into a lot of detail about the different kinds of Bardos and how to navigate them. But one of the things that really stands out is this idea of the 6 realms of existence.
Okay, this is the part that always gets me a little spooked. Are these like literal places? Like heaven and hell kind of thing?
Not in the sense of a physical location. Think of them more like psychological states. And what's really cool is that they map onto our everyday emotions and experiences in such a recognizable way.
Okay, I'm hooked. Already lay it on me. What's the first realm we're diving into?
Let's start with a classic, the hell realm. Now, this isn't about fire and brimstone or anything like that, but the psychological state it describes is all about intense suffering. Think like overwhelming fear, paranoia, getting stuck in negative thought patterns, maybe even feeling like you're going a bit crazy.
Ooh, yeah, I've definitely had days that felt pretty hellish. Not literally, of course, but just that sense of being trapped in negativity.
Exactly, and that's the point the book is saying. These states aren't somewhere out there. They're in our own minds. We create our own hell.
Okay, that's one realm, down 5 to go. What's next on this psychological map?
Let's move on to the hungry ghost realm. This one's all about insatiable craving. Always wanting more, never feeling satisfied. And it doesn't have to be about material possessions either. It could be a craving for attention, for validation, for anything really.
Oh man, I think we live in a culture that really feeds that hungry ghost mentality, right?
Oh, absolutely. Social media, advertising, it's all designed to make us feel like we're lacking something. And the book is saying that's a dangerous path to go down because it leads to constant dissatisfaction.
Yeah, you're always chasing that next hit, that next thing that you think will finally make you happy, but it never really does.
Right, and that's the trap of the hungry ghost realm. Always seeking, never finding true fulfillment.
Okay, 2 down, 4 to go. What other delightful psychological states do we have in store for us?
How about the animal realm?
Ooh, okay, so are we talking like primal instincts running wild?
Not exactly. Think more about getting stuck in rigid routines, lacking a sense of humor or openness to new things. It's about fear of change, basically. You know those people who just cling to the familiar, even if it's not really making them happy?
Oh yeah, I know a few people like that. They've got their routines, their little comfort zones, and anything outside of that is just terrifying.
And the book uses the metaphor of a cage. It's like they've built a psychological cage for themselves and they're afraid to step outside of it.
Wow. Okay, I'm starting to see how these realms really do reflect our everyday experiences. Okay, so that's 3 down. What's next?
Let's move on to something that might sound a bit more familiar, the human realm.
Okay, finally something relatable. But wait, knowing this book, there's gotta be a catch, right?
There's always a catch, right? So the human realm is all about passion, exploration, creativity. It's the realm where we experience the full range of human emotions and experiences, both the good and the bad. But the catch is that we can easily get caught up in the drama of it all.
So like ambition getting out of control, that kind of thing.
Exactly. Think about those people who are driven by success, but at what cost? They might achieve great things, but they lose sight of what's truly important along the way. Relationships, their own well-being.
It's like that Greek myth of Icarus, right? He could fly, but he got so close to the sun his wings melted. Ambition can be like that too.
Perfect analogy. Okay, so now we're getting into some of the more, shall we say, exotic realms. We've got the jealous god realm and the god realm itself.
Okay, jealous gods. That sounds like a reality TV show waiting to happen, but seriously, what's that all about?
Well, imagine having incredible intellect, sharp wit, but you're consumed by envy and suspicion. You're constantly comparing yourself to others, trying to one-up everyone. That competitive edge can turn pretty toxic.
Ooh, yeah. I've worked in environments like that. It's like everyone's trying to outshine each other. No one's genuinely happy.
And that's the trap of the jealous god realm. You're so focused on what others have that you can't appreciate your own gifts and accomplishments. And finally, we have the god realm. This is the realm of pure bliss, often associated with deep meditative states.
Okay, sign me up for that one.
Yeah.
But knowing this book, there's got to be a downside even to godlike bliss.
Oh, there always is. The danger here is getting stuck. You become so attached to the blissful feeling that you lose touch with the world and the messy reality of being human. It's like spiritual bypassing almost.
So even bliss can be a trap if you cling to it too tightly. Wow, this is really making me think about how these realms are less about some afterlife and more about recognizing these patterns in ourselves now.
Exactly, and that's one of the key insights of the Tibetan Book of the Dead. It's not just a guide to what happens after death, it's a guide to understanding the workings of our own minds.
Okay, so we've covered these 6 realms, these emotional weather patterns of the mind. But the book also talks about these wild visions people have in the Bardo, right? What's that all about?
Ah, yes, the visions. Now that's where things get really interesting. And maybe a little unsettling for some.
All right, well, before we dive into that psychedelic landscape,
Yeah.
I think we need to take a quick break, let our listeners catch their breath, maybe grab a cup of tea, and we'll be right back to explore those visions.
All right, so we've been talking about these 6 realms, right? And how they're like these emotional landscapes we can all find ourselves in.
Yeah, it's like a psychological map of the mind.
Exactly. But the Tibetan Book of the Dead doesn't stop there. It also describes these incredibly vivid, sometimes terrifying visions that people can experience in the Bardo.
Okay, this is the part that always kind of freaked me out a little bit. Peaceful deities, wrathful deities.
Yeah.
It sounds like something straight out of like a psychedelic trip.
It's definitely some intense imagery, no doubt about that. But here's the key thing to remember. These deities aren't external beings. They're projections of our own minds.
So like psychological archetypes.
Exactly. They represent different aspects of our being, both the light and the shadow. And what's really fascinating is that the book suggests we might experience these same kinds of visions in life, not just in the Bardo after death.
Wait, really? So you're saying like those times when I'm super anxious or like going through a major breakup, I might actually be having a Bardo vision without even realizing it.
That's exactly what the book is pointing to, and it actually offers advice on how to relate to these visions, whether they're happening in a dream, a meditation, or even just a moment of intense emotion.
Okay, I'm all ears. How do I not freak out when a wrathful deity shows up in my mind?
The key is to remember they're not separate from you. They're like waves on the ocean of your consciousness. So don't cling to the peaceful visions and don't be terrified by the wrathful ones. Just observe them, acknowledge their energy, and let them pass.
That's a pretty radical way of looking at our inner world. It's making me think about how I react to my own emotions. Maybe I need to be more of an observer rather than getting swept away by the drama.
That's the essence of the practice that the book encourages. To develop that awareness, that spaciousness within the mind so that you're not just at the mercy of whatever arises.
But what about those instructions for helping someone who is dying? That's something I think a lot of people feel really unprepared for.
It's a very tender subject for sure, and the book emphasizes honest and compassionate communication with the dying person, acknowledging their situation with truthfulness, but also helping them connect to a sense of peace. Perhaps even reminding them of their spiritual practice, if they have one.
I've heard about people reading from the Tibetan Book of the Dead to someone who's dying. Is that what's being talked about here?
It can be a part of it, yeah. But the guidance goes deeper than that. It's about creating a calm and supportive atmosphere, helping the dying person to let go of attachments and to recognize the luminosity that arises as consciousness separates from the body.
It sounds like a really delicate balance between acknowledging the reality of death, but also offering comfort and a sense of hope.
Exactly. And remember, the book is not just for the dying person, but also for those who are supporting them. It helps us to approach death with more awareness, less fear, and to see it as a natural transition, not an absolute end.
One of the things that really resonated with me was the book's description of the clear light, or Dharmakaya. It's like this pure awareness that's always present, but we usually don't notice it because we're so caught up in our thoughts and emotions.
Ah, yes, the clear light. That's a central concept in Tibetan Buddhism. And the book suggests that we can glimpse this clear light in the Bardo state, and even in moments of profound experience in life. It's like the ground of being, the source from which everything arises and to which everything returns.
But it also warns that most people will be blinded by the clear light because they're not prepared for its intensity.
Yeah, think of it like this. You've spent your whole life in a dimly lit room, and then suddenly you're thrust into brilliant sunlight. It can be overwhelming if you haven't gradually adjusted your vision.
Which is why the practice that the book emphasizes is so important. By cultivating mindfulness, recognizing the nature of our thoughts and emotions, we're essentially preparing ourselves to recognize and merge with that clear light.
Precisely. The more familiar we become with the true nature of our own minds, the less likely we are to be thrown off balance when we encounter the intensity of the Bardo. And who knows, maybe even in life, we can start to see glimpses of that clear light shining through.
This is seriously mind-blowing stuff. It's like the book is providing a roadmap for awakening, both in life and in death. And what's so cool is that it's not just theoretical, it offers practical techniques for navigating the journey.
That's the beauty of the Tibetan Book of the Dead. It combines profound philosophy with concrete practices that anyone can engage with.
We've covered a lot of ground, but I feel like we're just scratching the surface of this ancient wisdom.
There's always more to explore with this book. It's a lifelong journey, really.
Well, this deep dive into the Tibetan Book of the Dead has been truly mind-expanding. I feel like I've gained a whole new perspective on life, death, and everything in between.
I'm glad to hear that. It's a text that continues to offer new insights every time you engage with it.
Thanks for joining us on this journey into the Tibetan Book of the Dead. It's a journey worth taking, whether you're a seasoned spiritual seeker or just starting to explore the mysteries of life and death. Until next time, keep exploring, keep learning, and keep diving deep.
You know, it's funny, I came into this deep dive thinking the Tibetan Book of the Dead was going to be all about, like, spooky ghosts and scary visions.
Yeah, it definitely has that reputation.
It does, but exploring it with you, it's been, like, way more profound than I expected.
It's a lot more about life than death when you really get into it.
Totally. Like, this whole idea of our thoughts and emotions being empty projections, that just blew my mind.
It's easy to forget that, isn't it? We
Yeah.
get so caught up in the stories we tell ourselves. We do. We really do. And the book is like, wait a minute. Those thoughts, those feelings, they're not solid. They're not permanent. They're more like waves on the ocean.
Yeah, constantly changing, rising, and falling away.
And that brings us back to this idea of Bardo as a gap, an interval. It's not just about the time between death and rebirth. It's those moments in life where we're in between things.
When the old way of being is dissolving, but the new hasn't quite formed yet.
Exactly. And those times can be so uncomfortable, we naturally want to cling to what's familiar, even if it's not working for us anymore.
It's like we're hardwired to resist change.
We are. Think about those times when you're going through like a major life change, a career shift, a breakup, even just a period of personal growth. It can feel like you're lost in the wilderness.
And that's exactly where the teachings of the Tibetan Book of the Dead can be so helpful. It's like having a compass to navigate those uncharted territories.
Instead of freaking out, we could recognize, okay, I'm in a Bardo state, and use the practices the book offers to move through it with more awareness.
Exactly. To stay present, cultivate compassion, and remember that even in the midst of chaos and uncertainty, there's a path forward.
And maybe even a glimpse of that clear light we were talking about.
Exactly. Speaking of liberation, one thing that really struck me about the book is this idea that enlightenment isn't something you achieve in some distant future lifetime.
Yeah, it's not like you die and then boom, suddenly you're enlightened.
Right. It's saying that the potential for awakening is available to us right here, right now.
It's more about recognizing what's already here, not about achieving some special state.
Exactly. The book reminds us that the clear light of Dharmakaya, that pure awareness, is our true nature. It's like the sky, it's always there, even when it's obscured by clouds.
But it does take effort, right? It takes practice to actually see through those clouds.
It does. The path of awakening is not a quick fix. It requires commitment, willingness to look deeply into your own mind, to face your fears and attachments.
And it's a path that continues even after death, right? The book talks about all the different Bardo states we might go through and the visions we might encounter.
And it gives us guidance on how to navigate them skillfully so we can choose a favorable rebirth.
So it's really all about living a more awakened and meaningful life, both now and in whatever comes next.
Exactly. It's a guidebook for the whole journey.
Well, this deep dive has been incredible. I feel like I've learned so much about the Tibetan Book of the Dead, but also about myself.
It's a book that has a way of doing that. It's a mirror reflecting back our own deepest fears and aspirations.
And it gives us tools to work with those fears and aspirations, to transform them into something beautiful.
Absolutely. And it reminds us that we're not alone on this journey. There's a whole tradition of wisdom and practice to support us.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the Tibetan Book of the Dead. It's been a wild ride.
It has. And who knows, maybe we'll even have a chance to explore some of those visions in our own practice.
Maybe we will. And for everyone listening out there,